All right, in this video, we're going to go over alimony. I'm going to give you a brief rundown of what you need to know about alimony. So there's three types of alimony in Alabama. You've got interim alimony, we sometimes call it pending light alimony, alimony pending a final trial, rehabilitative alimony, which is alimony that's meant to rehabilitate one of the spouses to where they can make it on their own. And finally, periodic alimony, which is also known as forever alimony, or I think alimony that exceeds 5 years. Here is the flow chart I've created that explains what's needed in order to get certain types of alimony. We'll go over that later, but it does look complicated. All right, next, when will a party be awarded alimony? The court shall award either rehabilitative or periodic alimony if, and look at the word here, shall, it means they have to. Party lacks a separate estate. So if they don't have their own, let's say that the spouse has their own rental house or a house from before the marriage. Well, they may at that point have a separate estate. Or let's say that they have a retirement account with $200,000 in it. That could be a separate estate, but it's got to be a separate estate to enable the party to acquire the ability to preserve, to the extent possible, the economic status quo of the parties that existed during the marriage. Okay, so first of all, this doesn't make any sense because if you think about it, we've got two people in a marriage, or one, two, and when you divorce, you're only going to have one. So your incomes are going to go down and your bills are going to go up. And so how you maintain the economic status quo of the parties that existed during the marriage, it's completely up to determination from the judge. So that just goes back to, at the end of the day, it's scary to leave up to a judge, a person in a robe, to make these types of decisions for you. Next, the other party has the ability to supply those means without undue economic hardship. What does undue economic hardship mean? Again, it's up to this judge, whatever that means, whatever that person believes. There's case law that gives a little bit more detail on that, but again, at the end of the day, a lot of it's discretion with the judge. And then finally, they also have to meet the circumstances of the case, make it equitable. Is there adultery? Is there gambling? Is there economic waste? Things like that. So really, the word shall here, and then we also have the circumstances of the case make it equitable, which means fair in the eyes of the judge. It's just at the end of the day, this is unclear. Okay. So the first prong, the party lacks a separate estate and does not have the ability to preserve economic status quo. So first, the petitioning spouse, the person that wants alimony, has to show the standard of living. Hey, we're going on trips. Hey, we go to Walmart. We don't worry about what we buy at Walmart. Grocery store, we just throw it on the credit card and we pay it off at the end of the month. Things like that, right? Show a budget. That's important. Make sure you show a budget to the court, what you guys were spending and what you're going to need. So after you establish the marital standard of living, how much money you guys were spending, the spouse must prove your inability to achieve that same standard of living independently. So for instance, if you guys were spending $6,000 a month as a couple, but you're only bringing in now $3,000 a month, there you go. But again, it goes back to, of course, you're not going to be able to maintain that. There's two people, and now you're down to one paying the bills. Okay. In determining the sufficient separate estate, prong 2, you look at their own individual assets, marital property received by or awarded to the parties. So that would be, for instance, if the court gave you the house, well, you may not necessarily need alimony as much if you have a paid off house. The liabilities of the party. Well, if you're stuck with all the debt, you may need alimony to help pay that debt. Or if you are paying all the debt, that can kind of count as your alimony. Your own ability to make money, taking into account your age, health, education, and work experience and economic conditions. Do you have the ability to make more money? Or if you've been a housewife, uh, can you go back to nursing school and become a nurse? Can you graduate law school? Um, if you've been out of the workforce for a while, is the economy good? The court will take all those things into consideration. Um, any benefits that will assist the party in obtaining and gaining employment. So, for instance, the alimony could be told to last while they're in nursing school or law school. Um, so, are you taking here that you've got physical custody of the child? If your child's disabled and you can't work, well, then alimony might be appropriate at that point. If you're taking care of a disabled adult, they're not necessarily a child. The alimony might be appropriate at that time. And here's the final one: equitable. What does equitable mean? Whatever the court says it means. All right, ability to pay. Once the financial need of the petitioning spouse is established, you've got to prove that the other party has the ability to pay. How do you prove that? Their assets, the property that they were awarded, what debts they have, their net income, their wages, their abilities to pay. It's sort of just the opposite of the other person. So the circumstances of the case make it equitable. This is the catch-all phrase that we talked about before. The previous case law sums this up by explaining that when deciding periodic alimony, trial court can and should consider whether the marriage and its attendant standard of living ended due to the greater fault of one of the parties. And if so, the trial court can adjust the award accordingly. This prong allows the court to not award alimony to an adulterer, even though if they would meet 1 and 2. Again, we go back to there's equitable and shall in the same statute, which they make equitable completely makes shall meaningless. So once the court determines the party has met all 3 prongs, they shall be awarded alimony. But how much and for how long? Here's the flow chart. Do they lack the separate estate? Can't pay for it? Yes. Does the other party have the ability to pay? Yes. Does the circumstance make it alimony? Yes. They shall award alimony. Any of these are no, then the answer is no alimony. So next is rehabilitative alimony feasible? That's what the court's goal is now with this new alimony law. If it's feasible, if that means that it would fix the situation, then yes, we're going to do rehabilitative alimony, and it cannot exceed 5 years. If it's not, then you go back here. Does good faith rehabilitation only enable a party to partially acquire ability to preserve economic status quo? I mean, we're going back to vague terms because if there's 2 income earners at some point, it's just about impossible to meet economic status quo. You're doubling bills, things like that. But here we go. Did good faith rehabilitation fail? Yes, then you've got to do periodic alimony. If no, rehabilitative alimony. Once you've reached 20 years, there's no time limit to periodic alimony. Anything less than 20, there's a limit to the number of years that you were married. So let's go back to rehabilitative alimony. Unless the court expressly finds that rehabilitative alimony is not feasible, the court shall award rehabilitative alimony to the other party for a limited duration, not to exceed 5 years, absent extraordinary circumstances of an amount to enable the party to acquire the ability to preserve, to the extent possible, the economic status quo of the parties. So this is this clear message to the courts from the legislature that they prefer rehabilitative alimony rather than forever alimony. But can it exceed 5 years? Yes. It allows you to, if rehabilitative alimony is not feasible, that good faith rehabilitation will only enable the party to partially acquire economic status quo. What are some examples? One party is disabled or retired. If going back to school would only allow her to become a nurse, but they were earning doctor money. If she was a stay-at-home mom and going back to work, she has no skills, only gets her to minimum wage. So once the court finds that rehabilitative alimony is not feasible, the court shall award periodic alimony, but for how long? We went over this earlier. You can go up to the length of the marriage until you reach 20 years. Once you reach 20 years, you can get to forever. These are the circumstances of rehabilitative alimony, and it's similar circumstances as to whether there should be alimony at all.